This is the Sahel, a region in Africa stretching from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Red Sea in the east. The Sahel, a region on the cusp of the Sahara Desert, has long been marred by violent extremism, terrorism, droughts, and exploitation by foreign powers, leading to a situation today in which political instability, security issues, and humanitarian concerns have become the norm. The Western and Eastern Sahel have very different stories, however. Ethiopia in the east is one of only two African nations to ever avoid colonization, whereas the Western Sahel was taken over by France in the late 19th century, forming French Equatorial Africa, a colonial empire stretching from Gabon on the continent's west coast up to Algeria and Morocco in the northwest. This is our focus for this video. In this tranche of Western Africa, countries like Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and others, after gaining independence in the late 1950s and early 1960s, fell under military rule, each experiencing ethnic and religious divisions and numerous coups d'etats in which new military juntas seized power. But this post-independence era wasn't only marked by coups. There was also extensive corruption leading to misappropriation of aid and funding from the international community, on top of the already arid and desert-like climate conditions which jeopardized food security. The political and socio-economic instability, coupled with the lack of sustainable practices, resulted in famines, droughts, armed conflicts, and the rise of terrorist cells throughout the region. Of course, the role of the former colonial power cannot be overstated. Just as the US has done throughout the Middle East and North Africa, and the British Empire did before them, the French government maintained a dense network of connections with African leaders over whom they had previously ruled. In so doing, this area known as Franc-Afrique fell into a never-ending cycle of dictators and military juntas, propped up by France, where all parties protected each other's vested interests with little to no concern for human rights or the security of the local populations. By supporting these regimes, corruption was exacerbated, inequality between warring factions became more severe, and democratic norms were never established in a sustainable and authentic way. Look no further than the Rwandan genocide if you want to understand the apathy and lack of humanitarianism in France's approach to its destabilizing former colonies. While France is by no means the only entity to blame for the crisis in the Western Sahel, a more prudent approach to foreign policy in the post-independence era would have allowed the region to maintain more stability than it has. Fast forward to modern day, since 2020 there have been 9 coups in Western Africa, Central Africa, and the Sahel region, most of which were former French colonies. Gabon, Chad, Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, and Niger are the most notable. Many of these coups had overwhelming support from civilian populations, seeking to overthrow leaders that they felt were squandering resources without solving domestic issues, as well as mounting animosity towards their government's loyalty to former colonial powers like France. These events have led to the displacement of millions of people. Since Niger's July 2023 coup, a strong anti-French and more generally an anti-Western sentiment has reached a boiling point in the Western Sahel. The new military juntas have made it clear that collaboration with Western powers like France or the US is not an option, while France has also begun to take a step back from the region after the calamity of the last few years. As a result, great power rivals like Russia and regional powers like Turkey have stepped in to provide support to these nations and to fill the power vacuum left by the West. Will the Sahel find stability in new alliances with foreign powers, or will they exploit these nations' resources just like the West did? To understand this, we must look at new developments, including the strategic moves made by Western and Eastern powers in recent years, to assess where their leverage lies and to find out which one of them will win the race to dominate the Sahel. Let's begin with the US. In the era of US hegemony, especially from 1991 onwards, after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was no stopping Washington's strategic objectives. No superpower was strong enough to contest the spread of US military bases or to hinder their various operations, whether it be in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, or anywhere else. In today's multipolar world, where 3 superpowers, Russia, China, and the US, are competing for global dominance, there are more obstacles than ever for the US, with bases located in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, just to name a few. Oppressive regimes in the past may have been bad for the people of the Sahel, but they benefited Washington's force projection throughout the global south. This is now changing. In March 2024, Niger's coup government repudiated their deal allowing U.S. military bases on its soil, characterizing a historical shift in the geopolitics of Africa. Nigeria, along with other nations in proximity to France's former colonies that have long-standing ties to the U.S., will still allow U.S. forces there. But this will not be comprehensive enough to control the region like they did before. In late 2023, France completed their withdrawal of forces from Niger, marking the end of an era and signifying the West's loosening grip on the region. Now with the Sahel casting off the shadows of Paris and Washington, a void has been created. Niger speculates that France is planning a military intervention as a last-ditch effort to save their standing there. Because of this skepticism, Russia has stepped in to play peacekeeper. In September 2023, Russia and Mali endorsed diplomacy as the way to solve Niger's political crisis, positioning themselves as potential saviors. Russia vetoed an attempt by the UN Security Council to keep a team of UN experts in Mali, much to the delight of Malian leader Assimi Goïta, who, like his counterparts in the region, see institutions like the UN as extensions of colonial power. This is how strong the anti-colonial sentiment has gotten in the Sahel, between Mali being one of the few nations to support Russia's invasion of Ukraine at the UN and Mali and Russia's explicit support for Niger's coup government. Western fears of a Russian-Mali-Niger axis seem to be well-founded. Russia has also reinforced its efforts in the region through the Wagner mercenary group, with Islamist insurgency groups controlling large parts of the region and fighting against government forces. Russia has used the Wagner group to support Mali and contribute to the carnage, further positioning themselves as the antidote to Western nations who failed to provide security and establish political stability. The immediate withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from the region's economic bloc, ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, in January 2024, is another prescient development. Not only could this be an economic catastrophe for the region, fracturing trade and economic intercourse between the already impoverished nations, but it is another sign of the changing geopolitical dynamics. ECOWAS froze Niger's assets following their 2023 coup and established a no-fly zone. They even temporarily blocked aid to the country. The influence of Western powers and former colonial powers on ECOWAS policy is evident, and the bloc's sanctions on Niger only fortify the anti-colonial and anti-Western sentiments of these new coup governments. Now, with the rise of BRICS, these nations have another pathway to strengthen their ties to China and Russia, again underscoring how the East is coming to fill the West's shoes in the Sahel. As security issues have worsened over the past decade, China, Turkey, the Gulf states, and Russia have all been investing both financially and diplomatically in the Sahel. China's oil investments in Chad over the past 2 decades have made them one of the most well-equipped armies in Africa. Wagner is training Sahelian groups while Russia sells their arms. Russian disinformation campaigns have capitalized on anti-French sentiments. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey have used cultural diplomacy to emphasize their ties to the region by way of Islam and religious education. However, the longer the Ukraine war goes on, the less sense it makes strategically for Russia to pour resources into the Sahel. China similarly has strong economic ties to these nations through Belt and Road Initiative investments, but is hesitant to involve themselves militarily, even by proxy, as Russia does with Wagner. This leaves the Gulf states and Turkey to be the most viable options to fill the power vacuum. Why? Because apart from the religious links, these Gulf nations are also redefining their relationships with the US, where longtime client states of Washington like Saudi Arabia have taken a shine to the BRICS network and the philosophy of opposing Western financial hegemony. It is clear that a large-scale geopolitical shift is taking place in the multipolar world. Only time will tell where allegiances lie. We have not yet seen an indication of how hard the West will fight to regain control of the Sahel. US and French military operations, whether overt or clandestine, are certainly within the realm of possibility. The question is, with China rising to challenge US hegemony, will it be in the West's interest to commit these kinds of resources to the Sahel? Perhaps it is if Russia or China seize the majority of the geopolitical influence currently on the table there, as this poses a security threat to Western power projections. But if Turkey, a blossoming military powerhouse, takes control, or a Gulf state for that matter, it may be wiser for the West to maintain their focus on the Indo-Pacific and Western Europe to a lesser extent. The stakes are too high in the modern era to commit a massive geostrategic error of this kind. Regardless, one thing is clear: in the multipolar world, security competition and regional proxy conflicts will be the battleground for greater powers. And the states that prevail in regions like the Sahel will be able to dictate the geopolitical context of key areas of the globe, and in turn cement their position as hegemons in the ever-changing landscape of international politics. Thank you for watching. For more such videos and hot topics, check out our next video, and don't forget to subscribe.